So building on in small increments. What we did in this fractionation program is we took and broke this path down into 64 bite-sized steps. Each about 15 minutes, about a 15-minute independent lesson for each one of these. And so it's like, you know what, I'm going to be able to get this. Not too much. And each one builds on the last. Remember what we just did? We're just taking a little step forward from that. I have constant progress and being able to see my progress through this. And then supports. What kind of supports can we add? Well, you know, I don't remember what denominator was. And I don't speak English that well anyway. So we can provide vocabulary support as needed for kids. We can provide hints. Count the number of equal pieces in one whole. Little helps along the way. Multiple representations. Here's a number line. That's a little more abstract. Let's do something concrete. Jumping kids to a number line can be tough because it's a higher level of abstraction. So the research suggests starting with moving from staying with that linear representation, but one that's more concrete, moving to one that's more abstract, so we can have those supports and adjust them along the way. And then we can adjust the demands, the task. And that can be very simple. So here's a task of what's missing here. And you've got it segmented out. And the answer goes over here. And we can adjust that, make it even just a little bit harder. And so we're getting at that kind of fluidity. If you're always the same task of the answer's always over here, and I can count the number of things, then you're not giving the kids the flexibility. And it can be very simple, like, oh, wait a minute, the question's over here. I haven't seen it over there. And I don't have anything to count here. So we can make the task incrementally, subtly stronger. I'm not talking about making the numbers harder. That's really not what it's about. It's often saying, taking that same, unless it's about making the numbers harder, what you really want to do is say, do you really get this? Can I do it in ways that are a little bit different? Can I recognize it in formats that are slightly novel? There's a researcher we've worked with who uses this wonderful phrase of dimensions of novelty. And it's kind of a fun thing to think about. And so in Asian countries, they have a distinction between what they call exercises and what they call problems. And so exercises are things you already know how to do. We load kids up with exercises. We give them the same problem over and over and over again. And in places like Singapore, they don't reward kids for doing more exercises, because you already know how to do that. They want to reward kids for solving problems, something that they haven't done before. And that doesn't mean it has to be something completely new. When you think about the range of novelty, this is novel compared to this. Switching where the question mark is, switching just a little bit of the format and the organization. That's a dimension of novelty. So we can think about moving our kids forward. It isn't just about doing the same thing over and over again. We want to move them forward, and we can do it in subtle but very important ways by varying the dimensions of novelty over time. Focused practice. You can't get fluent without practice. So you want to have kids get plenty of rehearsal. And you need to give them immediate feedback. You want to keep them at the challenge that's right for them. We get rewarded. Our brains take about 25% of the energy that we put into our bodies every day. It's a very, very demanding organ. Other animals, their brains are not so demanding. That energy is used to make them stronger, to make them faster, quicker. Ours are up here. So it's not surprising that we get rewarded when we use this thing. When we learn something, when we do the same thing, when we do an exercise, the same thing over and over again, what do we do? We get bored, right? We don't get a reward for that. We get distracted. Our brain's like, what are you doing? I've done this like 1,000 times. I need to take a break from this. Go learn something. Go use that thing. But when we learn something, and this was this wonderful study that came out like last month from Syracuse. You may have seen this, where they went with these struggling students and they gave them challenging math problems and let them get frustrated. But they gave them support so that they could accomplish it. And then they talked to the kids afterwards, and the kid said, I was really frustrated, but you know what? We got it. It felt really good. and they wanted to do more. So it was like usually struggling kids, you give them stuff simple. They gave them stuff that was hard, but they adjusted the scaffolds so that they could, with effort, get there, which is part of the whole story. With effort, you can do it. You have to validate for kids that it's good. And then your brain rewards you with chemicals. It's like drugs. When you struggle and accomplish something, it feels good. When you do the same thing over and over again, you get bored. We need to challenge kids. They have to be achievable challenges. And sometimes we can, we adjust the task, and sometimes we adjust the supports around it. But if it's adaptive, and we're building forward with kids, and we give them the feedback, you got it, it feels good. If we don't give them the immediate feedback, then they don't know. You lose the opportunity for them to get that little dopamine hit.